Have you ever misjudged someone so completely it cost you everything? We've all seen arrogance, but what happens when it's directed at the one person you desperately need to impress? This isn't just a story about a rude customer and a waitress. It's a story about a hidden identity, a multi-billion-dollar deal hanging in the balance, and the moment a cruel taunt in a five-star restaurant triggers an explosion in a corporate boardroom. It's a story about how the woman serving your champagne might just own the entire vineyard. Stay with me to uncover the brutal, satisfying truth of what happened when a billionaire's girlfriend picked the absolute worst person in New York City to bully. The Air in Aria, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, was a carefully curated symphony of quiet success. It smelled of seared scallops, aged leather, and the subtle, almost imperceptible fragrance of old money. For the past 6 months, this had been Annalise Vance's world. To the patrons and her colleagues, she was just Anna, a quiet, efficient waitress, with an uncanny ability to anticipate a need before it was spoken, and an expression of calm neutrality that never wavered. Her uniform, a crisp black bespoke apron over a tailored white shirt, was her armor, the silver tray she carried her shield. No one here knew her last name. No one knew that the simple, functional watch on her wrist was a discreet Patek Philippe, a 21st birthday gift from her father. No one knew that she could buy this entire restaurant and the building it was housed in with a fraction of her trust fund. And that was precisely the point. Her father, the formidable Richard Vance, CEO of the global conglomerate Vance Enterprises, had laid down a gauntlet. "You want to inherit this company," he had said, his voice echoing in the cavernous study of their Upper East Side mansion. "Then you need to understand it. Not from the top, Annalise, from the bottom. Go work a real job, a service job, for 1 year. No help from me, no access to your funds beyond a basic living stipend. See the world from the other side of the counter. See how people treat those they believe are beneath them. That's the truest measure of a person's character." So Annalise had become Anna. She'd found a small apartment in Brooklyn, learned the punishing rhythm of a 12-hour shift, and felt the bone-deep ache in her feet at 2 a.m. She learned to differentiate the genuine smile from the condescending smirk, the polite request from the thinly veiled command. She saw Wall Street titans who treated her with grandfatherly kindness, and socialites who looked through her as if she were a ghost. It was a brutal, enlightening education. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, was a man who worshipped at the altar of perfection. He was perpetually stressed, his sharp eyes missing nothing. A stray crumb, a water glass less than 3/4 full, a server's smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. He didn't know who Anna was, and he treated her with the same demanding, impersonal rigor as everyone else, which she appreciated. It made the experience authentic. Anna Table 7 needs their check table. A 12 is asking for you, and the Blackwood party is arriving in 5. "They're in your section," Henderson hissed as he swept past her station, his face a mask of controlled panic. "And for God's sake, look alive. Carter Blackwood could buy this place as a waiting room for his private jet." Annalise simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She knew the name Carter Blackwood. He was a tech wunderkind, a self-made billionaire who had revolutionized data security. His company Cyberforge was on the verge of a landmark partnership with Vance Enterprises. Her father had mentioned him, calling him brilliant but surrounded by the usual sycophants. Annalise felt a flicker of professional interest. This was a chance to observe a potential major partner in his natural habitat. She retrieved a fresh bottle of Sancerre for table 12 before gliding towards the entrance. The hostess was already leading the party in. Carter Blackwood was handsome in a way that seemed almost computer-generated sharp jaw, intense blue eyes, and a suit so perfectly tailored it looked more like a second skin than clothing. He moved with the restless energy of a man whose mind was constantly 10 steps ahead. But it was the woman on his arm who drew Annalise's immediate attention. She was stunning, a cascade of platinum blonde hair falling over a sequined dress that shimmered like a captured galaxy. Her name was Tiffany Sterling, a name Annalise recognized from the society pages. She was an influencer, a model, a professional it girl, whose entire career was built on being seen in the right places with the right people. As she walked, she didn't just look at the restaurant. She appraised it, her eyes scanning the other diners with a dismissive air, as if confirming her own superior status. Annalise led them to the best table in the house, a secluded corner booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. "Good evening, my name is Anna. I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, her voice calm and even. Carter barely glanced at her, already scrolling through something on his phone. But Tiffany's eyes raked over Annalise from head to toe. It was a slow, deliberate inspection, filled with a chilly disdain that Annalise had become all too familiar with. Tiffany's perfectly glossed lips curled into a faint, unpleasant smile. "Anna," she said, drawing the name out as if it tasted foul. "Just Anna. No last name." How quaint. Annalise's training kicked in. She kept her posture straight, her gaze neutral. "May I get you started with some water for the table? We have still or sparkling. We'll have a bottle of the Chateau Margaux, 95. Tiffany snapped, not even looking at the wine list. "And make it quick. We have places to be." Annalise maintained her composure, though she noted the choice. It was one of the most expensive and frankly poorly paired wines for the restaurant's signature seafood dishes. It was a choice made not for taste but for price. It was a statement. As she turned to leave, she heard Tiffany's stage whisper to Carter, loud enough for her and the neighboring tables to hear. "Honestly, darling, can you believe the help they hire these days? You'd think for these prices they'd at least find someone with a bit of polish." Annalise didn't flinch. She walked towards the wine cellar, her steps measured and deliberate. The shield was up, the armor was in place. She had survived 6 months of this. She could handle one more entitled girlfriend. She had no idea that this night was different. This wasn't just another condescending patron. This was a collision course, and the impact would be far more devastating than anyone could imagine. The weight of the silver tray in her hand suddenly felt 100 times heavier. The Chateau Margaux was stored in the climate-controlled deep cellar, a place of reverent silence, where bottles worth more than Annalise's monthly salary slept peacefully. Retrieving it required a special key from Mr. Henderson and his signature in a leather-bound ledger. It was a ritual reserved for the highest echelons of their clientele. As Annalise presented the bottle to the table, her movements were a study in grace and professionalism. "The 1995 Chateau Margaux," she announced, quietly holding the bottle so the label was clearly visible. Carter finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. "Excellent choice," Tiffany preened, taking credit. "Only the best for my Carter." She waved a dismissive hand at Annalise. "Well, open it. Don't just stand there like a statue." Annalise placed the bottle in a decanting cradle, her hand steady as she expertly sliced the foil and twisted the corkscrew. There was a soft, satisfying sigh as the cork was drawn. The sound was usually a prelude to celebration, to a beautiful meal. Tonight it felt like the hiss of a fuse being lit. She poured a small amount into Carter's glass for him to taste. He swirled it, sniffed, and nodded his approval. As Annalise moved to pour for Tiffany, the woman held up a hand, 5 perfectly manicured nails tipped with diamonds. Don't pour mine yet, Tiffany said, her voice sharp. I want to be sure it has breathed sufficiently. Let it sit for 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes. And don't you dare come back a second sooner or a second later. It was a power play, a ridiculous and arbitrary demand designed solely to establish dominance. Annalise had seen it before. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Of course. I'll return in 10 minutes. In the meantime, are you ready to hear about our specials this evening? We don't need specials, Tiffany scoffed, picking up her menu and holding it with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. I already know what I want. Carter, darling, you must have the Wagyu. It's the only thing remotely acceptable here. She turned her cold gaze back to Annalise. He'll have the A5 Wagyu medium rare. And I'll have the Dover sole, but it must be deboned at the table. And I want to see the fish before you cook it. I won't be served some frozen and thawed nonsense. This was another test, a demand designed to be inconvenient to disrupt the kitchen's meticulous flow. Certainly, madam. I will bring the fish for your inspection. And for you, sir? She asked, looking at Carter. Carter waved a hand, distracted again by a notification on his device. The Wagyu is fine, whatever she said. His focus was clearly elsewhere, on the massive Cyberforge Vance deal that was in its final delicate stages. This dinner was meant to be a brief respite before a week of intense negotiations. He was operating in a world of algorithms and encryption keys. The petty drama unfolding at his table was little more than background noise he had learned to tune out. Annalise retreated her mind a flurry of precise instructions for the kitchen. The chef, a temperamental genius named Antoine, would curse her for the fresh fish inspection, but he would comply. This was the dance of high-end service, absorbing the client's ego and translating it into flawless execution. 10 minutes later to the second, Annalise returned to pour Tiffany's wine. As she leaned over, her arm brushed lightly against the sleeve of Tiffany's sequined dress. It was the barest of contacts, unavoidable in the tight space. Tiffany recoiled as if she'd been electrocuted. Ugh, watch it, she snapped, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? Your entire year's salary wouldn't cover the cleaning bill. The insult, so personal and so public, hung in the air. The couple at the next table fell silent, their forks hovering over their plates. Annalise felt a hot flush of anger rise in her cheeks, a deeply buried instinct to retort, to put this woman in her place. She could have said, "This dress is from last season's Balmain collection. I have 3 of them in different colors." But she swallowed the words, forcing them down until they felt like stones in her stomach. She was Anna, the waitress. And Anna didn't talk back. "My sincerest apologies, madam," she said, her voice a perfect monotone. She finished pouring the wine and retreated without another word. From the safety of her serving station, she watched them. Tiffany dominated the conversation, her voice bright and brittle, her laughter a little too loud. She was performing not just for Carter, but for the entire restaurant. She held up her left hand frequently, letting the enormous canary diamond on her ring finger catch the light. She talked about their upcoming trip to Monaco, about the yacht they were chartering, about a rival socialite's tacky new penthouse. Carter mostly nodded along, his attention divided. But Annalise noticed something else. She saw the subtle way Carter's eyes would glaze over, the way his smile didn't quite reach them. He was present physically, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't in love. He was managed. Tiffany was not just his girlfriend. She was a curator of his public image, a beautiful high-maintenance accessory that signaled his arrival in the upper echelons. Annalise's father's words echoed in her head. See how people treat those they believe are beneath them. Carter wasn't being cruel, but his apathy was a form of complicity. He allowed Tiffany's behavior to happen, creating a vacuum of accountability that she was more than happy to fill with her own brand of casual cruelty. He was enabling the serpent coiled at his table. The meal progressed in a series of similar small humiliations. The Dover sole was presented, and Tiffany examined it with the critical eye of a marine biologist before deeming it acceptable. The Wagyu was declared a degree too rare, and sent back only to be returned, and declared a degree too cooked. Each complaint was delivered to Annalise with a condescending sigh, as if she were personally responsible for the molecular structure of the beef. Through it all, Annalise remained a portrait of serene competence. She apologized, she rectified, she absorbed. But beneath the calm facade, a cold resolve was beginning to form. This was no longer just a test from her father. It was becoming personal. Tiffany Sterling had no idea who she was talking to, but Annalise was learning everything she needed to know about Tiffany. And more importantly, she was learning about Carter Blackwood. The brilliant mind her father respected was attached to a man with a profound moral blind spot. And in the world of Vance Enterprises' character was currency. Carter Blackwood, she was beginning to realize, was on the verge of bankruptcy. The main course was cleared away, each plate a battlefield of Tiffany's discontent. A new front in her war on Annalise's dignity was about to open over dessert. "Bring us the dessert menu," Tiffany commanded, snapping her fingers with a sharp crack that echoed in the hushed dining room. The gesture was so overtly demeaning that even Carter flinched and shot her a look. "Tiff, please don't do that," he murmured, his voice low. "What, I'm just trying to get her attention." "She seems a bit slow tonight," Tiffany replied, sweetly loud enough for Annalise, who was standing just a few feet away, to hear perfectly. Annalise felt the stares of other diners. She was no longer just a waitress. She was part of a floor show, the unwilling participant in a public shaming. She walked over and presented 2 leather-bound dessert menus. Tiffany didn't even take one. "I don't need to see it," she said, waving it away. "I'll have a single scoop of vanilla bean ice cream. But it must be from that little artisanal place in Greenwich Dolce Vita. Theirs is the only one I can tolerate. I assume a restaurant of this caliber sources the best Annalise knew for a fact their ice cream was made in-house by their award-winning pastry chef using vanilla beans imported directly from Madagascar. It was objectively superior. Our ice cream is made fresh here, madam. I can assure you it is of the highest quality." Tiffany let out a theatrical sigh of exasperation. "You see, Carter, this is what I mean. No initiative. I don't want your in-house sludge. I want Dolce Vita. Is that so difficult to understand?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "Listen closely, sweetheart. Your job is to provide what the customer wants. Now, I don't know if your little brain can comprehend this, but what I want is for you to get me the ice cream I asked for. I don't care if you have to run to Greenwich and get it yourself. It was an impossible, deliberately cruel request, a gauntlet thrown down with malicious glee." Annalise's mind raced. To her left, Mr. Henderson was watching, his expression thunderous. He was angry, but she knew it was directed at her. In his eyes, a good waitress would have found a way to de-escalate, to placate the customer, not allow the situation to reach this boiling point. "Madam, that would be impossible," Annalise said, her voice firm but respectful. "I can, however, offer you our full dessert menu, or perhaps a complimentary digestive for any inconvenience." Tiffany laughed a sharp, ugly sound. "Impossible. Impossible is a word for people who fail. People like you. What is your future exactly? You'll be slinging plates here until your looks fade. And then what? You'll be a bitter old woman in a stained apron, smelling of grease and regret." My life, on the other hand, she said, extending her hand to Carter and stroking his arm, is just beginning. I'm about to be Mrs. Carter Blackwood. We'll be flying to Paris next week to close a deal with Vance Enterprises. Ever heard of them? Of course you haven't. It's a world you couldn't possibly imagine. Every word was a poisoned dart aimed with precision. The mention of Vance Enterprises sent a jolt of ice through Annalise's veins. This woman, this vapid, cruel creature, was bragging about a deal with her family's company, a deal she was in the process of unknowingly sabotaging with every syllable she uttered. Annalise's neutrality finally cracked. For a fraction of a second, an expression of pure, cold fury flashed in her eyes. It was so fleeting that Carter missed it, but Tiffany, watching her with predatory focus, saw it, and it delighted her. "Oh, did I touch a nerve?" she purred. "Does the little waitress have feelings?" Suddenly, as if on cue, Tiffany's hand, which was gesturing wildly, knocked over her full glass of red wine. The dark liquid cascaded directly onto Annalise's pristine white shirt, a deep crimson stain spreading across the fabric like a blooming wound. "Oh my God!" Tiffany shrieked, jumping back. "Look what you made me do." "You were standing too close. You startled me." The accusation was so patently false, it was breathtaking. Annalise stood frozen, the cold, sticky wine soaking through to her skin. The entire restaurant was now staring openly. Mr. Henderson was rushing over his face, pale with fury. "I am so sorry, Mr. Blackwood, Miss Sterling." "So deeply sorry for this clumsiness," Henderson said, bowing and scraping as he glared daggers at Annalise. "This is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable." He turned on Annalise. "Anna, clean yourself up and then see me in my office. Immediately." Carter finally seemed to snap out of his stupor. He looked at the scene, the spilled wine, Annalise's ruined shirt, Tiffany's feigned distress, the silent judgment of the entire room. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed his face as he looked at Tiffany. He had seen her flick her wrist. It had been subtle, almost imperceptible, but he had seen it. "Tiff, that's enough," he said, his voice low and tight with an authority she hadn't heard before. "It was an accident." "Our evening is ruined, Carter," Tiffany wailed, playing the victim with theatrical perfection. "By this incompetent girl," Annalise looked down at the stain on her shirt. It was dark and ugly, but in her mind it wasn't wine. It was a line that Tiffany Sterling had just crossed in spectacular fashion. She looked up past the fuming Mr. Henderson, past the uncertain Carter Blackwood, and met Tiffany's triumphant, gloating gaze. Annalise's expression was unreadable, but behind her eyes, a decision had been made. The experiment was over. The education was complete. Class was about to be in session, and the final exam would be absolutely brutal. Without a word, she turned and walked away, not towards the staff restroom to clean up, but towards the exit. She ignored Mr. Henderson's sputtering rage. As she pushed through the kitchen doors, leaving the opulent dining room behind, she pulled out her phone. She had one call to make. The shield was down. The armor was coming off. The stark, fluorescent-lit chaos of the kitchen was a different world from the dim, controlled elegance of the dining room. Chefs barked orders over the clang of pans and the hiss of the grill. Annalise walked through it all like a phantom, oblivious to the questioning looks from her colleagues. She didn't stop until she was in the narrow, graffiti-scarred alley behind the restaurant, the city's cacophony, a welcome relief from Aria's suffocating atmosphere. The cool night air felt good against her flushed skin. She leaned against the rough brick wall, took a deep breath that smelled of rain and garbage, and looked down at the wine stain. It felt like a brand, a mark of humiliation. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the sting of it, the raw anger at being treated as less than human. She had followed her father's rules, humbled herself, and endured countless small slights. But this was different. This was a deliberate, targeted act of cruelty, witnessed by all, and she had been expected to absorb it with a smile. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the contact simply labeled RV, her father. Her first instinct was to call him, to tell him she was done, that his point had been made in the most spectacularly awful way possible. She could end this right now. One call and a black car would be here in 10 minutes. One call and Mr. Henderson would be unemployed. One call and Carter Blackwood's precious deal, the one Tiffany was so proud of, would evaporate into thin air. But as she was about to press the button, she hesitated. What would that prove? That she was her father's daughter? That she could wield his power? That wasn't the point of this exercise. The point was to learn to wield her own, to stand on her own 2 feet, not as an heiress, but as a person of substance. Reacting with overwhelming force right now would be her father's move. It wouldn't be hers. Revenge was a dish best served cold, as the old saying went, and Annalise was beginning to think this particular dish should be served in a boardroom, not a back alley. She put the phone away and took another shaky breath, forcing the fury down. Just then, the back door creaked open. It was Jenna, another waitress, her face etched with concern. Jenna was a struggling actress, working at Aria to pay for rent and headshots. She was sharp funny, and one of the few people who had shown Annalise genuine kindness from day one. "Anna, are you okay?" Jenna asked, holding out a clean, folded white shirt from her locker. "I saw what happened. That woman is a monster. Don't listen to a word she said, or to Henderson. He's just terrified of losing a big spending client." Annalise took the shirt, a lump forming in her throat. "Thank you, Jenna. Really. Don't mention it." "We've got to stick together," Jenna said, leaning against the wall beside her. "Seriously, though, what she did, spilling that wine on you and then blaming you, I saw it. It was on purpose. She's pure poison. And him, Mr. Tech Billionaire, just sitting there letting it happen. Pathetic." Jenna's simple, unprompted validation was more comforting than 1,000 platitudes. It reminded Annalise that her perception wasn't skewed. The injustice was real. "He's Carter Blackwood." Annalise said, her voice quiet. Jenna's eyes widened. "Get out. The Carter Blackwood from Cyber Forge." She let out a low whistle. "Wow, I read an article about him. Said he was this genius visionary. Guess they forgot to mention he has terrible taste in women and no backbone." The two stood in silence for a moment, a small pocket of solidarity in the grimy alley. It was in that moment a new plan began to crystallize in Annalise's mind. A better plan, one that required patience, precision, and a perfect poker face. "I have to go back in," Annalise said, changing into the clean shirt. "I have to face Henderson." "Are you sure he's going to fire you?" Jenna warned. "Let him," Annalise replied, a new, steely resolve in her voice. "Let him do what he thinks he has to do." She walked back into the restaurant, her head held high. She bypassed the kitchen and went straight to Mr. Henderson's cramped, windowless office. He was on the phone, speaking in a hushed, apologetic tone. He gestured furiously for her to sit. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood, I understand completely. A full comp on the meal, of course. And the employee in question is being dealt with as we speak. Yes, terminated, absolutely. My deepest apologies again for your ruined evening." He hung up the phone and leveled a gaze of pure venom at Annalise. "You are fired," he spat the words, clipped and final. "I have never in my 15 years as a manager witnessed such an appalling lack of professionalism." You antagonized a guest, you were clumsy, and you showed a complete lack of deference. Pack your things and get out. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Annalise didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply nodded. I understand. Her calm acceptance seemed to infuriate him more than any protest would have. Is that all you have to say? I understand. You just lost your job. Yes, I did, she said, her voice even. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. Mr. Henderson, for future reference, you should know that loyalty to your staff can sometimes be a greater asset than appeasing a tyrannical customer, especially when you don't have all the facts. She walked out, leaving him gaping in her wake. She collected her few belongings from her locker, said a quiet goodbye to a sympathetic Jenna, and walked out the front door of Aria. She didn't look back. The experiment was officially over. But the real work was just beginning. Tiffany Sterling and Carter Blackwood thought they had won. They thought they had succeeded in swatting away a minor annoyance, a nameless, faceless servant. They had no idea that they hadn't just fired a waitress. They had activated an adversary. And Annalise Vance was a far more formidable opponent than Anna, the waitress, could ever be. She walked into the New York night no longer shielded by a silver tray, but armed with something far more powerful knowledge. She knew their character, and she was about to use it to architect their downfall. The week following her dismissal from Aria was one of quiet, meticulous preparation for Annalise. She shed the persona of Anna like a snake, shedding its skin. Gone were the sensible shoes and plain ponytail. She re-emerged as Annalise Vance, a woman who moved with the understated confidence of someone who has never had to ask for anything in her life. She spent her days in the sprawling library of her family's mansion, not relaxing but working, the target of her focus Cyberforge and its impending partnership with Vance Enterprises. The deal was larger than she had initially realized. It was a multi-billion-dollar joint venture to create a next-generation cybersecurity platform for the global financial market. It was her father's legacy project, and Cyberforge's technology was the linchpin. Carter Blackwood wasn't just a potential partner. He was the key. Annalise devoured every file, every projection, every line of code she could access. She pulled market analyses, competitor reports, and most importantly, the complete personnel files on Cyberforge's executive team. She cross-referenced everything with her father's private notes. She wasn't just trying to understand the deal. She was looking for vulnerabilities. And the biggest vulnerability she suspected was not in the code, but in the character of its CEO. Meanwhile, in Carter Blackwood's world, the incident at Aria had become a small but persistent thorn. Tiffany, sensing his disapproval that night, had doubled down on her victimhood. "I can't believe that waitress got you so upset, Carter," she'd said on the ride back to his penthouse. She was clearly unstable. Who knows what she might have done? The manager was right to fire her on the spot. Carter had remained quiet. He had replayed the moment in his mind a dozen times. The flick of Tiffany's wrist, the waitress's shocking momentary flash of fury before her mask of neutrality slipped back into place. The calm way she had accepted her fate. Something was wrong. It didn't add up. He was a man who built his fortune on recognizing patterns, on seeing the ghost in the machine. And there was a ghost in this memory he couldn't exorcise. His unease grew over the next few days. He noticed things he'd previously ignored, the imperious way Tiffany spoke to valets, the condescending tone she used with his household staff, her casual dismissal of anyone she deemed unimportant. He had always seen it as part of her high society persona, a performance he found mildly amusing. But now, seen through the lens of her cruelty to Annalise, it looked ugly and mean-spirited. The final meeting with Vance Enterprises was scheduled for Friday. It was the culmination of a year of negotiations. The deal would be signed in the main boardroom on the 80th floor of Vance Tower. Tiffany insisted on being there. "Darling, I have to come," she'd insisted, wrapping her arms around his neck. "This is the biggest moment of your career. I want to be there, to see you sign the papers that make you a legend. And besides, I want to finally meet the infamous Richard Vance. They say he's a recluse. I bet I can charm him." Carter had his reservations. This was a serious business meeting, not a social event. But Tiffany could be relentlessly persuasive, and fighting her on it seemed more exhausting than acquiescing. He reluctantly agreed. "Fine, Tiff, but you have to be on your absolute best behavior. These people are old school. Professionalism is everything to them." "Of course, darling," she'd purred. "I'll be the perfect supportive fiancé." On Thursday afternoon, the day before the big meeting, Annalise made her move. She called a meeting with her father. Richard Vance sat behind his immense mahogany desk, his face as stern and unreadable as ever. He had already heard a sanitized version of the Aria incident from his security detail, who kept a discreet, distant watch on her. "So you were fired," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "The experiment is over then. The experiment is over." Annalise agreed, her voice cool and steady. "And I have my conclusions. Not just about service or humility, but about our pending partnership with Cyberforge." She laid it all out. She didn't complain or whine about how she was treated. Instead, she presented a clinical, scathing business analysis. She described Tiffany Sterling's behavior not as a personal insult, but as a worrying indicator of Carter Blackwood's judgment. He is a brilliant technician, father, no one disputes that. But he surrounds himself with people of low character. He is either blind to their nature, or worse, he is indifferent to it. His fiancée's behavior at that restaurant was a demonstration of profound instability and poor judgment. She publicly bragged about this deal, treating it like a piece of gossip. She showed a reckless disregard for discretion. Annalise leaned forward, her eyes locking with her father's. "Character, you told me, is the truest measure. What does it say about a man who allows such cruelty and foolishness to sit at his right hand? This isn't about a rude girlfriend, father. It's about a critical lack of insight in a man we are about to entrust with the security of the entire global banking system. His personal life demonstrates a massive blind spot, and a blind spot in cybersecurity is not a weakness. It is a fatal flaw." Richard listened, his steepled fingers covering his mouth. He had expected a story of personal grievance. He was being presented with a corporate risk assessment. For the first time in a long time, he saw not just his daughter, but a worthy successor. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Let the meeting proceed tomorrow as planned," Annalise said, a glint of steel in her eye. "Let him bring her. Let them walk into that boardroom thinking they're on the verge of the biggest triumph of their lives. I will also be at that meeting, and I will present my findings on his character flaw in person." A slow, rare smile spread across Richard Vance's face. "Very well," he said. "I think it's time Mr. Blackwood was properly introduced to the Vance family." The thread had been pulled. The entire tapestry of Carter Blackwood's perfect life was about to unravel. Friday morning dawned bright and cold over Manhattan. From the windows of the 80th floor boardroom in Vance Tower, the city looked like a circuit board of glass and steel. The room itself was the physical embodiment of power, a 40-foot table of polished black granite chairs of soft Italian leather, and an unnerving cathedral-like silence. At one end of the table sat Richard Vance, flanked by his senior legal counsel and CFO. Carter Blackwood and his team sat opposite them. He felt a nervous energy thrumming through him, the kind of exhilarating tension that preceded a massive victory. Tiffany sat just behind him, a silent, smiling statue. She wore a Chanel power suit in a shade of cream, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She looked the part of the billionaire's fiancée, projecting an aura of serene confidence. Inside, however, she was buzzing with triumph. This was it. The final validation. The moment she would ascend to a new stratosphere of the social elite. She scanned the faces of the Vance Enterprises executives, a smug little smile playing on her lips. They looked so stern and old. They had no idea what real glamour was. The final documents, a stack of papers an inch thick, lay in the center of the table. The mood was formal, charged with anticipation. Gentleman Richard Vance began, his voice commanding the room. We are here to finalize a partnership of immense significance. Before we sign, however, there is one final member of my executive team I'd like you to meet. She has been conducting a final unconventional due diligence report on this venture. My daughter and our new head of strategic risk assessment, Annalise Vance. On cue, a side door opened. Carter and his team turned, expecting to see another stern-faced executive in a suit. Annalise Vance walked in. She was the antithesis of the downtrodden waitress. She wore a tailored navy blue dress that spoke of quiet expense, her hair styled in a sleek professional bob. The simple functional watch on her wrist was the same one she had worn at the restaurant. Her face was calm, her gaze direct and intensely focused. She walked to the empty chair beside her father, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Time seemed to slow down. For Carter Blackwood, the world tilted on its axis. His mind struggled to reconcile the two images, the humiliated waitress in the wine-stained shirt, and this powerful, impossibly poised woman, taking her seat at the head of one of the world's most powerful companies. The blood drained from his face. He felt a cold, sickening dread wash over him. But his shock was nothing compared to Tiffany's. Her jaw literally dropped. The color vanished from her cheeks, leaving her perfectly applied makeup looking like a garish mask on a statue. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. It was her, the waitress, the slow, incompetent, pathetic little servant. Here, at this table, in this room. It was impossible. A nightmare. Annalise sat down and placed a slim portfolio on the table in front of her. She didn't look at Tiffany. Her piercing gaze was fixed solely on Carter. Mr. Blackwood. She began her voice, the same calm, even tone he remembered from the restaurant. Yet now it carried the weight of absolute authority. We last saw each other at Aurea a week ago. I was working there under the name Anna. It was part of let's call it an undercover management training program instituted by our CEO. She let that sink in. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Tiffany's ragged, panicked breathing. My father believes that you cannot truly understand a business until you've seen it from the ground up, Annalise continued. He also believes that a person's true character is revealed by how they treat those they perceive to have no power. Over the past week, my official role has been to assess the single greatest non-technical risk to this partnership, your judgment. Carter was speechless. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He felt like he was falling from a great height. Annalise opened her portfolio. My report is brief. On the evening of October 3rd, you and your fiancée, Ms. Tiffany Sterling, were patrons at a restaurant where I was employed. Over the course of a 3-hour dinner, I observed behavior that I can only classify as a catastrophic liability to any venture predicated on trust, discretion, and stability. She looked directly at Tiffany, now her eyes cold as a winter sky. Ms. Sterling displayed a pattern of erratic and belligerent behavior. She made arbitrary and impossible demands. She engaged in public ridicule of staff. She was indiscreet, loudly referencing this highly confidential partnership in a public space. And Annalise's voice dropped, becoming icier. Still, she culminated the evening by deliberately causing physical damage to my attire, and then lying about the incident to have me terminated. Tiffany finally found her voice. It was a pathetic, squeaking thing. No, that's not true. She was clumsy. She was rude. Ms. Sterling, Richard Vance said, speaking for the first time since Annalise entered. His voice was like the crack of a glacier. This boardroom has a zero-tolerance policy for falsehoods. We also have security footage from the restaurant, which we procured this morning. It is illuminating. That single sentence shattered Tiffany's last shred of composure. All the color that had drained from her face came rushing back in a blotchy, terrified flush. She looked at Carter, her eyes pleading. Carter, tell them she's lying. But Carter couldn't look at her. He could only stare at Annalise, the woman his fiancée had tormented, the woman who now held the fate of his entire company in her hands. The ghost in the machine was real, and it was sitting right in front of him. Annalise closed her portfolio. The conclusion of my report is, this Cyberforge's technology is impeccable. Its leadership, however, is compromised by a critical failure of judgment. Mr. Blackwood, you either failed to see the character of the person you intend to marry, or you saw it and chose to tolerate it. In either scenario, you have demonstrated a blind spot that Vance Enterprises cannot afford to ignore. We require partners who are not just brilliant, but discerning. Not just successful, but sound. She stood up, her movement signaling the end of the meeting. Therefore, on behalf of Vance Enterprises, I am recommending that we indefinitely postpone this partnership. We will be re-evaluating our position and exploring other options. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. It was over. In less than 5 minutes, the deal of a lifetime, a year of work, $1 billion future, all of it had been annihilated. Not by a market crash or a technical flaw, but by a scoop of vanilla ice cream and a glass of spilled wine. Carter's team sat in stunned silence. Tiffany Sterling made a choked sobbing sound and finally broke, burying her face in her hands. Carter finally looked at her, and for the first time he saw her with perfect clarity. He didn't see a beautiful, glamorous socialite. He saw a liability, a poison, the architect of his own ruin. And as Annalise Vance walked coolly out of the room, he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that this was a catastrophe of his own making. The fallout from the disastrous boardroom meeting was swift and brutal. As the Vance Enterprises team filed out of the room, leaving Carter and his delegation in a state of shell shock, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Tiffany's sobs were the only sound in the vast, silent room. Carter didn't look at her, didn't offer a word of comfort. He was staring at the stack of unsigned papers on the granite table, a monument to his failure. His lead counsel finally broke the silence. Carter. What do we do? Carter stood up slowly, his movements stiff like an old man's. He walked to the window and looked out over the city. It was a view he had dreamed of commanding, and now it felt like it was mocking him. He had been so close. He turned, and his gaze finally fell on Tiffany. The look in his eyes was one she had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but a cold, empty finality. "Get your things out of my apartment," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "You have 2 hours. My security will escort you." "Carter." "No," she wailed, stumbling towards him. "Please, we can fix this. I can apologize. Apologize, he repeated, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping his lips. You think an apology can fix this? You didn't just cost me a deal, Tiffany. You revealed a fundamental flaw in me. A flaw he gestured vaguely towards the door where Annalise had exited, identified and exploited perfectly. This is over. All of it. He walked out of the room without another word, his team scrambling to follow. Tiffany was left alone in the cavernous boardroom, her sobs echoing off the cold granite and glass. Her fairy tale had ended. She had mocked the waitress and lost the kingdom. She would be a pariah. The story would be all over the city by nightfall, not the official version, but the whispered, more delicious truth. She would be a punchline, a cautionary tale of hubris and cruelty. In the weeks that followed, the story unraveled just as she feared. Carter Blackwood, in a desperate act of damage control, issued a public statement announcing the mutual postponement of the partnership to realign strategic goals. But the inner circles of New York finance and tech knew the real story. Carter's reputation was irrevocably damaged. He was seen as a man who lacked judgment, who couldn't control his own house, let alone secure the world's financial data. Investors grew wary. His company's stock took a significant hit. The legend had become a liability. Annalise, on the other hand, ascended. Her father officially announced her new position as Executive VP of Strategic Risk, and the story of her undercover operation became a legend within the company. She was no longer just the heiress. She was the woman who had saved the company from a multi-billion-dollar mistake, with nothing more than a silver tray and a keen eye for character. She had earned her place, not by birthright, but by merit. One of her first official acts was to revisit Aria. She didn't go as a customer. She went as a potential investor. The restaurant had been struggling, and Vance Enterprises' hospitality division was looking to acquire a high-end brand. She walked in during the pre-dinner rush, dressed in an elegant but understated pantsuit. Mr. Henderson was in his usual spot, barking at the staff. He saw her and stopped dead, his face going white. Miss Vance?" he stammered, rushing forward. I had no idea. I am so terribly, terribly sorry." Annalise held up a hand, stopping him. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What I learned working here is that your staff is your greatest asset. You have some exceptional people, and you have a manager who is willing to sacrifice them for the whims of a single bad customer. That is a poor business model." She walked past him into the kitchen and found Jenna, who was polishing glasses. Jenna's eyes widened in shock when she saw her. "Anna, what are you?" "My name is Annalise," she said with a warm smile, "and I'm here to offer you a job. We're restructuring this place, and I need a new general manager. Someone who understands that kindness is not a weakness, and that employees deserve loyalty. Are you interested?" Jenna was speechless, a glass held forgotten in her hand. She finally broke into a huge grin and nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Annalise Vance had completed her father's challenge. She had seen the world from the bottom up, and it had made her a better leader. She understood now that power wasn't just about making deals and giving orders. It was about seeing the unseen, valuing the undervalued, and understanding that sometimes the most important person in the room isn't the one sitting at the table, but the one standing quietly watching and waiting for their moment. The waitress had become the queen, not by magic, but by character, and her reign was just beginning. That's the story of Annalise Vance, a woman who proved that true power isn't about the name you carry or the money in your bank account, but the character you show when you think no one important is watching. It's a powerful reminder that the person you dismiss today could hold your future in their hands tomorrow. We all have moments where we can choose kindness or cruelty, empathy or arrogance. What do you think was Carter as much to blame as Tiffany? What would you have done in Annalise's position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Annalise's journey from humble waitress to boardroom titan, and if you believe in the power of character and consequence, then please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life dramas. Your support helps us bring these powerful tales to light. Thank you for listening. What is the true value of a single dollar? For most, it's nothing. A forgotten coin in a pocket, not even enough for a cup of coffee. But what if that dollar was a key? A test. What if the most insignificant gesture you've ever received was actually the most important moment of your life? This is the story of Anya Sharma, a waitress drowning in debt and despair, who served a meal to one of the world's most reclusive billionaires. He left her a $1 tip on a $5,000 bill. But it's what she did next, her simple, unexpected reaction, that set in motion a chain of events that would unravel a decades-old secret and change her destiny forever. Stay with us. The air in the Gilded Sparrow was different. It was thicker, heavier, scented with money, and the kind of perfume that didn't come from a department store. Anya Sharma breathed it in every night, and every night it felt like she was breathing in a world she could serve, but never join. The restaurant, a bastion of old-world New York elegance, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street on the Upper East Side, was a theater, and she was merely part of the scenery. Her feet throbbed. It was a familiar, deep-seated ache that started in her arches and radiated up her calves, a constant reminder of the 12-hour shifts. She moved with an economy of motion born from years of practice balancing trays laden with seared scallops and truffle-infused risotto, her smile a carefully constructed mask. It was a good mask. It had to be. It hid the exhaustion, the gnawing anxiety about the stack of medical bills on her small kitchen table, and the ghost of a dream she was too tired to even remember most days. Just 3 years ago, her hands now calloused from hot plates and polishing cutlery had been covered in clay and charcoal. Anya had been the star sculpture student at Pratt Institute, her work described as viscerally alive. She could see shapes in blocks of marble, feel stories in twisted wire. Then came the phone call. Her younger sister Nina diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that required experimental treatments not fully covered by any insurance plan. Their parents were gone, lost in a car crash years ago, leaving Anya as Nina's sole guardian. The choice was never a choice. She dropped out, sold her chisels and tools, and picked up a tray. The art school scholarship evaporated, replaced by the relentless reality of rent and pharmacy co-pays. Tonight was a Tuesday, usually a slower, more manageable evening. But a late reservation had come in under a discreet booking name, Mr. Black. The maitre d', a perpetually stressed man named Lawrence, had pulled Anya aside, his voice, a low, urgent whisper. "Sharma, table 7. This is a big one. Very, very big. No mistakes. Don't be too chatty. Don't be invisible. Just be perfect." Anya nodded, the practiced, deferential nod of a seasoned waitress. Table 7 was the best in the house, a secluded alcove with a plush velvet banquette that offered a panoramic view of the restaurant's private garden. When the party arrived, the usual low hum of the dining room seemed to dip a few decibels. There were 2 men. The first was easy to read, Gregory Thorne. He was in his late 40s with a mane of silver hair, a tailored suit that probably cost more than Anya's car, and a Rolex that caught the light with every expansive gesture. He radiated a slick, predatory confidence. He was the kind of man who enjoyed being noticed. The other man was the one who held the room's gravity. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His hair was a shock of white, but his eyes, deep-set and startlingly dark, missed nothing. He wore a simple dark grey suit, impeccably tailored, but devoid of any brand-name flash. He didn't speak as he sat down. He simply absorbed the space around him, his presence a quiet, immense weight. This was Damien Blackwood. Anya knew the name, of course. Everyone did. Blackwood was a legend, a ghost. He was the architect of a global tech and logistics empire, a man who had famously started with nothing but a single brilliant idea for optimizing supply chains in his 20s. He was now worth an estimated $50 billion, but he was pathologically private. There were fewer than a dozen authenticated photos of him in existence. He gave no interviews, attended no galas, and his company Blackwood Consolidated Poumou was a fortress. Seeing him here in the flesh was like spotting a mythical creature. "Good evening, gentlemen," Anya said, her voice smooth and even, betraying none of the shock she felt. "My name is Anya, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. May I start you with some water?" Gregory Thorne waved a dismissive hand. "Voss still. 2 bottles, and we'll have the 98, Chateau Margaux." He didn't look at her, his eyes already scanning the menu, with an air of entitlement. Damien Blackwood, however, was looking directly at her. His gaze wasn't unkind, nor was it friendly. It was analytical probing. It felt less like he was seeing a waitress, and more like he was examining a specimen, noting the faint tremor in her hand as she poured the water, the slight wear on the cuff of her uniform, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was unnerving. "Thank you, Anya," he said. His voice was a low baritone, gravelly with age, but clear as a bell. It was the first time a customer in a long time had used her name with such deliberate clarity. The meal was an exercise in tension. Gregory Thorne did most of the talking, boasting about a recent acquisition, name-dropping politicians and CEOs, a peacock displaying his feathers for an unimpressed audience. Damien Blackwood said very little. He ate slowly, deliberately, his dark eyes occasionally flicking up to watch Anya as she cleared a plate or refilled a glass. Each time, she felt the intensity of his observation like a physical touch. He asked her a single unexpected question when she presented the dessert menus. "Anya," he said, cutting through Thorne's monologue. "This finial." He gestured with his fork toward the intricately carved wooden pineapple atop the banquette's corner post. "It's new." Anya was taken aback. The finial had been broken a month ago by a rowdy guest. The owner, Mr. Russo, had gotten a quote to have it professionally repaired that made his eyes water. So Anya had taken the splintered pieces home. In the few precious hours between her shift ending and sleep taking over, she had carefully glued, filled, and recarved the damaged sections, matching the original design perfectly. She'd used the last of her old wood-carving tools. She hadn't told anyone. "Yes, sir. The old one was damaged," she said, choosing her words carefully. "This one is better." Blackwood stated not as a compliment, but as a fact. "The lines are cleaner, more confident." He turned back to his menu, leaving Anya standing in stunned silence. Gregory Thorne shot her an annoyed look, irritated by the interruption. They skipped dessert and asked for the check. Anya ran the card, a black, featureless piece of metal, with no name, only a number. The total came to £4,815.62. She placed the leather billfold on the table. Thorne was already on his phone, sealing another deal in a loud voice. Blackwood took the billfold, scribbled a signature, and placed something in Sewell. "Thank you, Anya," he said again, his eyes meeting hers one last time. It was an excellent meal. Then they were gone, leaving a wake of silence behind them. Her fellow waiters looked at her with a mixture of awe and envy. The Blackwood table. The tip would be legendary. Enough to cover Nina's next treatment cycle, maybe even pay off a chunk of her credit card debt. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic bird beating against her ribs. She waited a full 5 minutes, letting her hands steady, before she walked back to the table. She picked up the leather billfold. It felt strangely light. Her breath hitched. She opened it. Inside, on the line, designated for the tip, Damien Blackwood had written in firm, clear script, $100. Next to it, the grand total, $4,816.62. Tucked into the sleeve was the signature slip and a single, crisp $1 bill. The world tilted on its axis. The hum of the restaurant faded to a dull roar in her ears. $4,800 and a $1 tip. It wasn't just cheap, it was an insult, a deliberate, calculated, soul-crushing statement. Every eye in the restaurant was on her, waiting to see the legendary tip, waiting to see her reaction, and all she could do was stare at that single, solitary dollar. Anya stood frozen, the leather billfold clutched in her hand. The dollar bill inside felt heavier than a block of lead. It was a brand-new note, so crisp it could have been printed that morning. George Washington's portrait stared up at her, his expression impassive, almost mocking. $1. The number echoed in the silent chamber of her mind. It wasn't just the lack of a generous tip. A 0 would have been better. A 0 could be an oversight, a mistake made by a man unused to handling his own affairs. But $1 was intentional. It was a gesture that required thought. It was a message. Her first instinct was a hot, blinding flash of fury. How dare he? This man who could buy the entire city block without noticing the expense, who spent $5,000 on wine and food as a casual Tuesday dinner, looked her in the eye, used her name, and then left her a tip that was less than the cost of a subway token. He had commented on her carving, seen her work, and then dismissed her with the most contemptuous sum possible. The humiliation was a physical thing, a burning sensation that crept up her neck and tightened her throat. Her colleague, a jaded waiter named Ben, sidled up to her. "Well, don't keep us in suspense. Did he buy you a condo?" He whispered, his eyes gleaming with vicarious greed. Anya couldn't speak. She just opened the billfold and showed him. Ben's jaw dropped. He blinked, then looked again. A low whistle escaped his lips. "No way, no way, Blackwood. The billionaire left you a buck." His whisper turned into a choked laugh of disbelief. That's brutal, man. That's colder than the walk-in freezer." The word spread through the staff like wildfire. Whispers turned to stares. The sympathy in their eyes was mixed with a morbid curiosity, the kind people reserve for watching a car crash. The legendary tip was indeed legendary, but for all the wrong reasons. Anya felt her carefully constructed mask begin to crack. The professional smile faltered. Her shoulders slumped. She wanted to run, to go to the staff bathroom and either scream or burst into tears. Lawrence the maitre d' stormed over his face a thundercloud. "What is this I hear?" "Let me see that." Anya handed it over. Lawrence stared at the receipt, his face turning a blotchy red. Unbelievable. The nerve of these people. They think they own the world. He looked at Anya, his expression a mixture of pity and frustration. "Look, Sharma, don't take it personally. These guys, they live in a different reality." He probably didn't even think about it. But Anya knew that wasn't true. Damien Blackwood had thought about it. Every action he took seemed deliberate, from the way he sat to the way he observed her. He had looked right at her. He knew. This was a statement. The question was, what was it trying to say? She retreated to the small, cluttered break area, the $1 bill now in her apron pocket. She could feel its crisp edges through the fabric. Her mind raced cycling through a tornado of emotions, rage, shame, confusion, and a deep, profound sense of injustice. The money itself wasn't the point. Not really. Yes, a large tip would have been a godsend for Nina's mounting medical expenses. It would have been a brief respite from the constant crushing financial pressure. But this was about dignity. Her work, her professionalism, her very existence in that dining room had been valued at 100 cents. She thought about Nina, frail but fierce, whose smile was the only thing that kept Anya going. She thought about the mountain of bills, the threatening red letters on the envelopes. The hope that had foolishly bloomed in her chest for 2 hours had been violently extinguished, leaving behind a bitter ashen residue. Despair began to seep in, cold and heavy. This was her life. Serving condescending men who saw her as less than human, forever chasing bills she could never quite get ahead of. The dream of the artist of the sculptor felt like a fantasy from another person's life. She pulled the receipt from her pocket and looked at it again. 4,815.662. And then his signature. A strong, decisive scrawl. Damien Blackwood. Beneath it on the customer copy was the empty space where she was supposed to just accept this. And then something shifted. The anger was still there, a hot coal in her gut. But something else rose to meet it, a stubborn spark of defiance. The same spirit that had driven her to spend hours meticulously recreating a broken wooden finial for no pay and no recognition. The same spirit her father, a brilliant but perpetually broke engineer, had possessed. He used to tell her, "Anya, they can take your money, they can take your time, but never ever let them take your grace." She wasn't just a waitress. She was Anya Sharma. She was a sister. She was an artist, and she would not be defined by this man's contemptuous dollar. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't complain to her manager again. She wouldn't let this break her. She would respond. An idea bold and terrifying formed in her mind. She walked back out into the now emptying dining room and approached Lawrence. "Lawrence," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need the guest copy of that receipt back, the one he signed." Lawrence looked at her confused. Why, for a souvenir, Anya, just throw it out. Forget him. "I'm not going to throw it out," she said. "I'm going to do something else." She took a pen from her apron. Her hand was shaking, but not from fear or weakness. It was shaking with a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. She smoothed the receipt on a clear section of the service bar. For a moment, she wasn't in a restaurant. She was back in her studio, a blank canvas before her. This little slip of paper was her canvas now. She wouldn't be rude. She wouldn't be sarcastic. That would be playing his game, sinking to the level of pettiness the dollar suggested. She would rise above it. She would give him the one thing he clearly didn't expect. She took a deep breath, and she began to write. The pen felt alien in her hand, so different from the familiar weight of a chisel or a sculpting tool. Yet as she touched the tip to the paper, a sense of calm settled over her. This was her response, her one chance to reclaim her dignity from the cold indifference of a billionaire. She didn't write on the merchant copy. That had to be filed. She took the customer copy, the one meant for Blackwood's own records, which he had left behind on the table. It was on this slip of paper next to his powerful signature and the insulting one-horse rollers that she would make her stand. Her handwriting was neat, a relic from years of art school drafting classes. She wrote carefully, choosing her words not to wound, but to convey a truth he had overlooked. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for dining at the Gilded Sparrow tonight. On the receipt you valued my service at $1. I accept it not as an insult, but as a challenge. You see, a single dollar can be powerful. For some, it is the start of a fortune. For others, it is the meal they weren't sure they would have. It can be a seed, or it can be a symbol. You are a man who clearly understands the value of building something from nothing. So I will treat this dollar with the respect it deserves. I will invest it, not in stocks or bonds, but in a moment of kindness for someone who needs it more than I do. Perhaps it will buy a coffee for a homeless person on a cold morning, or a flower for someone having a bad day. Thank you for this reminder that true value is not always what is written on a check, but what one chooses to do with what they are given. I hope you have a safe evening. Sincerely, Anya Sharma, Table 7, the artist who fixed the finial. She added the last line on impulse, a final quiet assertion of her identity beyond the uniform. She reread the words. They were not angry. They were not sycophantic. They were simple, direct, and filled with a quiet grace she didn't even know she possessed. It was a response he could not have anticipated. She had taken his gesture of contempt and transformed it into an act of charity, subtly turning the tables on him. She had refused to be the victim. Ben watched her, his expression one of utter bewilderment. What did you do? Are you writing him a complaint? They'll fire you, Anya. No, she said, folding the note neatly. I'm just closing out the check. Her next move was even bolder. She walked to the front desk where Lawrence was sorting through the evening's reservations. Lawrence, I need an address, she said. What address? Anya, go home. Get some rest. The booking address for Mr. Black. You have it on file. I need to mail him his receipt. Lawrence looked at her as if she had grown a second head. Are you insane? We do not contact guests, especially not this guest. You'll get me fired. You'll get yourself blacklisted from every restaurant in this city. He left his copy. Anya insisted, her voice unwavering. It's a business expense. He'll need it for his records. It's my professional duty to ensure he receives it. She was using the language of the service industry, a shield of professionalism for her audacious plan. I won't say I'm from the restaurant. I'll just mail it. Standard procedure. Lawrence argued for 5 minutes, but there was a stubborn light in Anya's eyes he had never seen before. Finally defeated and deeply worried, he scribbled an address on a piece of paper. It wasn't a home address, but the corporate headquarters of Blackwood Consolidated on Park Avenue. I never did this, Sharma. This is on you. Thank you, Lawrence, she said, taking the paper. The next morning, after just 4 hours of sleep, Anya woke up before her alarm. The first thing she did was take the crisp $1 bill from her uniform. She went to the corner bodega, bought a single stamp and an envelope. With the change, she bought a hot coffee. On her way to the post office, she saw a man huddled in a doorway, shivering in the early morning chill. An old man with weary eyes and hands raw from the cold. She walked up to him and held out the coffee. "Here," she said softly, "for you." The man looked up surprised and took it with a grateful nod. "God bless you, miss." Anya felt a strange lightness in her chest. She had followed through. The dollar was already invested. At the post office, she sealed the envelope containing the folded receipt with her note inside. Her hand hovered over the mailbox slot for a long moment. This was the point of no return. She could lose her job. She could become a pariah in the industry she depended on to survive. Or nothing could happen. The note could be thrown away by some mailroom clerk, never to be seen by the man it was intended for. She thought of her father's words, "Never let them take your grace." She pushed the envelope through the slot. It was gone. The days that followed were thick with anxiety. Every time Lawrence looked at her, she expected him to say, "You're fired." Every phone call from an unknown number made her heart leap into her throat. She went to work, smiled her professional smile, cared for Nina, and tried to pretend that she hadn't just thrown a message in a bottle into the most powerful and unpredictable ocean in the world. The incident with the dollar had faded from the staff's gossip, replaced by new dramas. For everyone else it was over. For Anya, the waiting had just begun. A week passed, then another. Nothing. The silence from Park Avenue was absolute. The hope that had flickered within her began to die, replaced by a weary resignation. It had been a foolish, romantic gesture. Of course he'd never seen it. She had made her stand to an empty room. Life went on a monotonous cycle of work and worry. Nina had a bad week, and a new expensive medication was prescribed. The credit card bill arrived, and Anya felt the familiar squeeze of panic. The dollar, the note, the brief feeling of empowerment. It all felt like a distant dream. She was just a waitress again, and that was all she would ever be. 70 floors above Park Avenue, in an office that was less a workspace and more a temple of minimalist power. Damien Blackwood sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of reclaimed oak. The room was silent, the view a panoramic sweep of the city he had in many ways conquered. His desk was completely clear, save for a single tablet and a small, cream-colored envelope. The envelope had arrived via inter-office mail, flagged by his long-serving executive assistant Martha for its unusual nature. It was addressed to him personally, sent via standard post to the main corporate address, a channel no one who actually knew him ever used. His personal mail was filtered through a half-dozen layers of security. This had slipped through the cracks of the public-facing system. He had opened it, expecting a crank letter or an unsolicited business proposal. Instead, he found the customer copy of his receipt from the Gilded Sparrow, and tucked inside a handwritten note. He read Anya Sharma's words once, then a second time, then a third. A slow, unfamiliar sensation bloomed in his chest. It was not amusement. It was not anger. It was a profound sense of surprise. In his world, people responded to power in predictable ways. They fawned. They groveled. They asked for things. They seethed with impotent rage. They threatened lawsuits. He had built an empire on his ability to predict human behavior, to see patterns in greed, ambition, and fear. This was not in his playbook. He had left the $1 tip for a very specific reason. It was a test, But it was a cruel one, the final stage of a multi-layered evaluation. His friend Dominic Rousseau, the owner of the Gilded Sparrow, had been his eyes and ears for months. Damien had given him a strange set of criteria. He was looking for someone with integrity, resilience, a quiet intelligence, and a creative spark that hardship hadn't managed to extinguish. Rousseau had mentioned Anya Sharma. He'd told Damien about her background, her cancelled scholarship, her sick sister. He'd even mentioned offhandedly how she had fixed the broken finial without being asked. That had piqued Damien's interest. The finial was the first test. His comment about it at dinner was to see if she would take credit, if she would be boastful. She hadn't been. She had been modest and professional. The second test was her demeanor throughout the meal, enduring Gregory Thorne's boorish arrogance with unwavering composure. The $1 tip was the final brutal filter. It was designed to provoke a raw emotional response, to see what lay beneath the professional veneer. He had expected anger tears a complaint to the manager. He had expected a typical human reaction. He had not expected grace. He had not expected whole charity. He had not expected her to take his cynical gesture and elevate it. I will invest it in a moment of kindness. The line resonated with him on a level he hadn't accessed in years. And the final sign-off. The artist who fixed the finial. It was a declaration, not of defiance, but of identity. She was telling him who she was, not what he had tried to make her. He swiveled in his chair and looked out at the city. The reason for this bizarre covert search was a secret he held close to his heart, a weight of guilt he had carried for over 30 years. It concerned Anya's father, David Sharma. Decades ago, before Blackwood Consolidated was a titan, Damien had been a ruthless young entrepreneur. David Sharma was a brilliant, gentle-souled engineer working at a small firm Damien was acquiring. David had developed a revolutionary logistics algorithm, a piece of code so elegant it was practically art. It was the key to unlocking massive efficiency gains. Damien knew it was David's work, but the intellectual property belonged to the firm. He acquired the company, took the algorithm, and built his empire upon it. He had paid the firm, of course, but David Sharma, the true genius behind it, got nothing but a severance package. Damien had told himself it was just business, but he never forgot the look in David's eyes, not of anger, but of deep, quiet disappointment. David went on to live a modest life, never achieving the success his intellect deserved, and died too young. The guilt had festered in Damien for decades. He couldn't undo the past, but he could make amends to the future. He learned David had 2 daughters. He wanted to help them, but not with a simple handout. That would be too easy an insult to the memory of a man who valued integrity over wealth. He needed to know if David's character, his grace under pressure, had passed to his child. He needed to find the artist, not just the survivor. Anya Sharma's note was the proof. She was her father's daughter. He buzzed his intercom. Martha, get me Evelyn Reed on the line, and find out everything you can about a young woman named Anya Sharma and her sister Nina Sharma. Medical history, financial status, everything. Be discreet. Evelyn Reed was his personal lawyer, a woman as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. She handled the matters that required absolute precision and zero sentimentality. While he waited for the call, Gregory Thorne entered his office, all teeth and confidence. Damien Morning, I'm about to close the deal on that Singapore port contract. They're folding on all our key demands. Damien didn't look up from the note. Gregory, do you remember the waitress from the Gilded Sparrow the other night? Thorne scoffed. The pretty one, vaguely. Why, I left her a $1 tip, Damien said, his voice flat. Thorne chuckled. I saw that. Savage. Putting the help in their place. What was that about? It was about seeing what she would do, Damien said, finally looking at Thorne, his dark eyes cold. She took the $1, bought a coffee for a homeless man, and sent me a letter explaining the principles of true value. Thorne's smile faltered. He didn't understand. A nutcase, then. You get all sorts. No. Damien said the word like a chip of ice. She's an artist. He folded the note and placed it in his breast pocket. Gregory, I'm transferring you to the head of the South American division. You'll be based in Sao Paulo, effective immediately. Thorne was floored. Sao Paulo, but the Singapore deal. That's a demotion. Why? Because you saw a pretty waitress to be put in her place, Damien said, turning back to his window. And I saw a person of character. Your perspective is limited. Go and broaden it. My jet will be ready for you tomorrow. Thorne stood there sputtering, but he knew better than to argue. A decision from Damien Blackwood was as final as gravity. He backed out of the office, his world turned upside down. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Reed is on line 1, sir. Damien picked up the phone. Evelyn, he said, his voice now devoid of all emotion. I have a new project for you. It's a delicate matter. Its name is Anya Sharma. The ripple had hit the shore. Now the tide was about to turn. 2 weeks after she had mailed the letter, Anya had convinced herself it was a forgotten dream. Life had settled back into its grueling rhythm. Nina's condition had stabilized, but the cost of her new medication was staggering, wiping out what little savings Anya had managed to scrape together. The Gilded Sparrow felt more like a cage than ever, the forced smiles and polite chatter grating on her frayed nerves. The brief flicker of defiance she had felt was gone, smothered by the heavy blanket of reality. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was not a bill or a junk mail flyer. The envelope was made of thick, creamy cardstock, her name and address written in elegant, fluid calligraphy. There was no return address, only a simple embossed seal on the back, a stylized BR. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of matching cardstock. The message was brief and printed in a severe, no-nonsense font. Anya Sharma. This letter serves as an invitation to a meeting to discuss a matter of potential significance to you. The meeting will be held this Friday at 2:00 p.m. at the offices of Reed & Associates, located at 450 Park Avenue, Suite 5500. A car will be sent to your address at 1:15 p.m. to escort you. Please be prompt. Sincerely, Evelyn Reed-esque. Reed & Associates, Park Avenue, a car service. Anya's mind went into overdrive. She had never heard of Evelyn Reed. What matter of potential significance? Her first thought was that she was being sued, that Damien Blackwood, offended by her audacity, was bringing the full weight of his legal team down on her for harassing him. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She was going to lose her job, be buried in legal fees she could never hope to pay. This was the consequence of her foolish pride. She spent the next 2 days in a state of quiet terror. She told no one, not wanting to worry Nina or invite Lawrence's "I told you so." She considered not going, just disappearing. But the summons was too formal, too powerful. Ignoring it felt like it would only make things worse. On Friday, she asked for the day off from the restaurant, citing a personal appointment. At exactly 1:15 p.m., a black Lincoln town car, so polished It looked like a pool of liquid shadow pulled up in front of her modest apartment building. The driver, a man in a crisp suit, got out and opened the door for her without a word. The ride downtown was surreal. Anya, in her best and only blazer, felt like an imposter as the city's landscape shifted from the worn brick of her neighborhood to the gleaming steel and glass of Midtown Manhattan. The offices of Reed & Associates were on the 55th floor. The reception area was a study in intimidating minimalism: white marble floors, grey suede walls, and a single, terrifyingly severe receptionist who directed her to a conference room. The room had one glass wall with a view that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. Anya sat at the enormous mahogany table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. After a few minutes, the door opened and a woman entered. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent features, hair pulled back in a severe chignon, and eyes the color of a winter sky. She wore a perfectly tailored grey suit. She radiated an aura of competence so intense it was practically a force field. "Ms. Sharma," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. "I am Evelyn Reed. Thank you for coming. Please have some water." She gestured to a pitcher on the table, but didn't wait for an answer. She sat opposite Anya, placing a thin leather portfolio on the table between them. "I'll be direct, as I find it saves time," Evelyn began. "I represent a client who has taken an interest in your situation. This client has become aware of certain financial hardships you are facing, specifically regarding your sister's medical care." Anya's blood ran cold. "Who is your client? Is it Damien Blackwood?" Evelyn's expression didn't flicker. "My client prefers to remain anonymous at this stage. Let's call him a benefactor." She opened the portfolio. "My benefactor is prepared to establish a trust. This trust will cover in full all of Nina Sharma's medical expenses, past, present, and future. It will also provide a generous monthly stipend for her living and care expenses." Anya stared at her, speechless. This wasn't a lawsuit. This was a rescue. A lifeline thrown from an invisible hand. It was too much, too sudden. "Why?" was the only word she could manage to push out. "Why would anyone do this? My client believes in targeted philanthropy," Evelyn said smoothly. "He identifies individuals who are facing undue hardship and provides assistance. Consider it a no-strings-attached gift." No strings attached. Anya had lived long enough to know that nothing, especially not from people who employed lawyers like Evelyn Reed, was ever truly free. The suspicion returned a knot in her stomach. "What's the catch?" Anya asked, her voice stronger now. "What do I have to do?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Evelyn's lips. "There is no catch in the way you mean. There is, however, a condition, a formality." She slid a single document across the table. It was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement dense with legalese. "You will be required to sign this agreeing never to discuss the source of these funds, this meeting, or my client with anyone for any reason. Furthermore," she paused, her gaze intensifying, "my client owns several art galleries and foundations. He is always looking for new talent to support. He is prepared to offer you a significant personal grant, enough to allow you to leave your current employment and return to your artistic pursuits full-time." It was the dream. The impossible buried dream, offered up on a silver platter. Leave the restaurant. Go back to sculpting. Take care of Nina without the constant terror of debt. It was everything she had ever wanted, and it felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. This wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. An anonymous billionaire was trying to buy her dream and her silence. Why? What was he hiding? The memory of the $1 tip surfaced. That act of cruelty, followed by this act of overwhelming, anonymous generosity. It didn't add up. It felt like a manipulation, another more sophisticated test. "And if I sign this," Anya said, gesturing to the NDA, "this benefactor also offers me an art grant." "A very substantial one," Evelyn confirmed. "So he buys my silence, and he buys my art." Anya stated, the pieces clicking into place in her mind. It was a golden cage. He would solve her problems, but he would own her story. He would turn her art, her soul, into another one of his assets. Just then, Anya's phone buzzed. It was a text from her co-worker, Ben. She glanced at it. "Ben, you won't believe this. That slick suit Thorne, the guy who was with Blackwood. He just came into the restaurant. He was asking for you. Seemed really desperate. Said he had an offer for you that was better than anything Blackwood could ever give you. Lawrence told him you had the day off." The guy looked furious. "Watch your back." A new player had just entered the game. Gregory Thorne. He knew. He was making a move. He was trying to get to her before his old boss did. Anya looked up from her phone, her mind racing. She was caught between two powerful invisible forces. One was offering her a gilded cage. The other was a snake in the grass, likely offering a poisoned apple. She looked Evelyn Reed directly in the eye. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. "Ms. Reed," she said, pushing the unsigned NDA back across the table. "I appreciate the offer. It's more generous than I can possibly imagine. But before I sign anything, I have one condition of my own." Evelyn Reed raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No one gave her conditions. "I will not accept a single penny from a man who won't look me in the eye," Anya said, her voice shaking slightly but full of conviction. "I will not be a project for some anonymous benefactor. If your client wants to help me, he can meet me, face to face, and he can tell me why." Evelyn Reed's composure, as solid and impenetrable as the marble in the lobby, finally showed a hairline crack. She was momentarily speechless, an occurrence so rare it was noteworthy. She stared at Anya not with annoyance, but with a new grudging respect. She had presented the perfect solution, a turnkey escape from a life of hardship, and this young woman had just pushed it back across the table, demanding the one thing Damien Blackwood never gave a personal audience. "Ms. Sharma," Evelyn said, recovering quickly, her tone laced with a warning. "My client does not meet people. That is not how he operates. I strongly advise you to reconsider. This offer will not be made again." "Then I guess I will have to decline," Anya said, a terrifying calm washing over her. She stood up, her legs surprisingly steady. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Reed. Please pass along my regrets and my condition to your client." She turned and walked out of the conference room, through the silent, opulent office, and into the elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just walked away from security, from a future for Nina, from her own resurrected dream. It was the most insane, self-destructive thing she had ever done. And it felt absolutely right. As she stepped out onto Park Avenue, the city's noise rushing back in, she pulled out her phone and reread Ben's text. "Gregory Thorne, an offer better than anything Blackwood could ever give you." Thorne was the key. He was the disgruntled, demoted executive. He was the weak link in Blackwood's world of secrets. He might have the answers she needed. Instead of going home, she took the subway back to the Gilded Sparrow. She found Ben polishing glasses at the bar. "Tell me everything he said," Anya demanded. Ben's eyes were wide. "Anya, it was weird. He was slick but also sweaty, desperate. He said he knew Blackwood was trying to get to you, and that it was all a scam. He said Blackwood ruins people, and he wanted to warn you. He left his card, told me to have you call him day or night. Said it was a matter of life and death." Ben slid a heavy embossed business card across the bar. "Gregory Thorne, Global Strategy Consultant." It had a personal cell number on it. Anya's mind was a whirlwind. Thorne was painting Blackwood as a villain. Was this anonymous charity just a prelude to some kind of trap? What could Blackwood possibly want from her that would require such an elaborate scheme? She knew calling Thorne was a risk. He was obviously playing his own angle. But he was also the only person willing to talk. She needed information, leverage. She went to a nearby coffee shop, took a deep breath, and dialed the number. Thorne answered on the first ring. "Anya Sharma. I was hoping you'd call. I assume you've had a meeting with the Ice Queen, Evelyn Reed." "How do you know about that?" Anya asked, her voice steady. "I know how Damien operates." Thorne said, his voice a slick conspiratorial purr. "He finds a person's weakness and he leverages it. He's offering you money for your sister, isn't he? An art grant. He makes you think he's a savior. But he's a devil, Anya. I worked for him for 15 years. I know." "What do you want Mr. Thorne to help you?" He said the lie so smooth it was almost believable. "And to get a little justice for myself. Damien is obsessed with your family. It's about your father, David Sharma." Anya froze, the coffee cup trembling in her hand. "My father? He's been dead for 10 years. What about him?" "Your father was a genius," Thorne said. "He invented the core algorithm that Blackwood Consolidated is built on, the source of all of Damien's wealth, and Damien stole it. He bought the company your father worked for, took the tech and threw your father away like trash. Now he's old and consumed by guilt. This whole act, the test, the money. It's not for you, it's for him. He's trying to buy absolution. He'll set you up in some foundation, make you a poster child for his generosity, and use your father's story to launder his own reputation. You'll be a puppet, Anya." The words hit her like a physical blow. It was a plausible, ugly story. It explained the obsession, the secrecy, the overwhelming generosity. It painted Blackwood not as a benefactor, but as a user, just as he had been 30 years ago. "What's your offer, Mr. Thorne?" Anya asked, her voice cold. "Simple," Thorne said. "Don't take his deal. I've been documenting Damien's unethical business practices for years. Your story is the human element I need. We go to the press, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. Billionaire's empire built on stolen genius founder's daughter reveals all. It's a massive story. It would cripple him. And for your cooperation, I'll give you a finder's fee from my own accounts. Let's say $10 million. Clean. More than he's offering, and you get to tell the truth instead of being his pet project." $10 million. It was a staggering, life-altering number, and all she had to do was destroy Damien Blackwood. She thought about it. The rage she felt on Blackwood's behalf was real. He had wronged her father. He had built a $50 billion Emma on her family's stolen legacy. Thorne was offering her revenge, and a fortune besides. But something felt off. Thorne's story was too neat, his motives too transparently selfish. He didn't care about justice for her father. He cared about revenge for his demotion. He wanted to use her story as a weapon, just as he claimed Blackwood did. She would be trading one puppet master for another. And then she remembered the note. The artist who fixed the finial. Blackwood hadn't thrown it away. He had read it. He had responded. A man trying to simply buy absolution wouldn't have bothered with such an intricate personal test. He could have just had a lawyer cut a check. He was looking for something more than just an heir to give money to. He was testing for character, her father's character. Anya saw the whole board. Blackwood, the guilty king. Thor, the vengeful knight. And she, the pawn they were both trying to move. It was time for the pawn to make her own move. "Okay, Mr. Thorne," Anya said, her voice sounding surprisingly convincing even to her own ears. "I'm interested, but I need proof. Something concrete about my father's work being stolen." Thorne took the bait. "Of course. I have copies of the original code design documents from the acquisition. I'll email them to you. You'll see. It's all there in black and white." "Send it," Anya said, "and we'll talk again." She hung up. 20 minutes later, an email arrived from a secure server. It contained scanned documents, schematics, and lines of code. She didn't understand all of it, but she recognized her father's neat, precise handwriting on the margins of several pages. It was real. Thorne had given her the weapon. But she wasn't going to use it on Damien Blackwood. She was going to use it to get her meeting. She forwarded the entire email to one person, Evelyn Reed. She added a short, simple message in the body. "Reed, it seems your client is not the only one with an interest in my family's history. Mr. Thorne has been very forthcoming. He has offered me $10 million to take this story to the press. My original condition stands. I want a meeting with your client, face to face. Now he has a reason to agree. This is not a threat. It is a request for the truth. Anya Sharma." She hit send. She had played her hand. The king was in check. Now she would see if he would come out from behind his walls. The response came less than an hour later, a call from a blocked number. It was him. "You have your meeting." Damien Blackwood said, his voice a low gravel. "My car will be there in 1 hour." The car didn't take her to an office. It sped north along the Hudson River, arriving at a stunning house of glass and steel perched on a cliffside. Blackwood was waiting for her on a stone terrace, looking older and more tired than he had in the restaurant. "I want the truth," Anya said, foregoing any pleasantries. He met her gaze, his own filled with a deep, ancient regret. "The truth is that Gregory Thorne told you a part of it." He began, his voice heavy. "I built my empire on the genius of your father, David Sharma. It was a moral theft, and it is the great regret of my life. I wanted to make amends, but I couldn't simply give you money. My shame wouldn't allow it." He continued the words, a confession, decades in the making. "The test, the finial, the $1 tip. It was a cruel, selfish attempt to see if your father's greatest quality had survived in you. His grace under pressure, his integrity. I needed to know if you were his daughter in spirit, not just in blood. Your note was the answer. You didn't just pass my test, Anya. You showed me a character I thought no longer existed." He led her from the terrace inside, bypassing the opulent living areas, and opening a set of tall double doors. The room beyond was an artist's dream. A massive, light-filled studio, complete with blocks of marble sculpting tools and a soaring glass wall overlooking the river. "This isn't a handout," Blackwood said softly. "It is a restoration. I stole your father's legacy, and in doing so I stole your time, your focus, your chance to create. I am giving it back." He explained it all. A permanent, unconditional trust was already established to cover all of Nina's medical needs for life. "That is a debt repaid," he stated. "But this," he gestured to the incredible studio, "this is for you. I have established the David Sharma Foundation for Emerging Artists with an initial endowment of $500 million. Its mission is to fund artists who have faced hardship. You will be its first grant recipient, and when you are ready, you will have a permanent seat on its board. You will not be my project. You will be the one who finds and supports others like you." Anya walked into the center of the room, tears finally streaming down her face. It was not a feeling of wealth, but of release. The crushing weight she had carried for years was simply gone. He hadn't just given her money. He had given her back her purpose, her soul. Her life was forever changed, not by the insult of a $1 tip, but by the strength of her response to it. She had met cruelty with grace and unlocked not a fortune, but a destiny. In the quiet of the studio, with the river flowing endlessly below Anya Sharma, the artist picked up a chisel. It felt like coming home. Anya's story teaches us a powerful lesson about the world we live in. It's a reminder that our circumstances don't define us, but our reactions to them do. She could have responded with anger, with despair, and no one would have blamed her. But instead, she chose dignity. She chose grace. She chose to see value where someone else saw none. That single powerful choice didn't just change her life. It redeemed a past she never knew existed and built a future that will help countless others. Her story is a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about the power you have, but about the character you show when you have none. It proves that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the most profound consequences. If Anya's incredible journey from a struggling waitress to a life of purpose moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And for more true stories that inspire and make you think, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. What is the kindest act you've ever seen in response to a negative situation? Let us know in the comments below.